You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday, March the 8th. Falkland Islanders defy Argentina with Sunday referendum. The absurdity of our police and media. Danish headmaster in court for sex offences. Belgium, man sentenced for tearing Koran in front of Muslims. It's not a good time to be a Hindu in Bangladesh. Armenian genocide to be included in Australian school curriculum. Thought for the day, sexism, racism and ageism in the workplace. And finally, the world's strangest towns, Longyearbyen. UK News. Falkland Islanders defy Argentina with Sunday referendum. The Falkland Islanders, 1,649 registered voters, go to the poll on Sunday in the first of 2 days of voting to express their wish to retain British rule. The vote is expected to send a near-unanimous rebuke to Argentina. Reuters have reported Ladbrokes described the result as the biggest certainty in political betting history and said no one had placed a bet on a no vote. The confidence of the bookmakers on a yes result is such that a £1,000 bet with most online bookies on a yes vote will earn you just £1, whilst if you are foolish enough to place the same 1,000 on a no vote, you could, in theory, win £50,000. The absurdity of our police and media. If you want to weep for your children, start here. Refers to a BBC News Leicester article, Guerrilla Knitting in Leicester to Reduce Crime Fear. The first article is obviously written by an American and the second by our liberal Marxist friends at the BBC. The BBC, alongside Charlotte Bilby, a senior lecturer in criminology at Northumbria University, and Sergeant Simon Barnes, actually believe hundreds of pom-poms and knitted items have been strung from trees and lampposts to help reduce the fear of crime in an area of Leicester. Miss Bilby said, "I think that making an area look cosier certainly makes an area feel safer. And, as we all know, more officers on the beat doesn't actually have a massive impact on crime rates in an area." Sergeant Simon Barnes said, "I'm really hopeful that the actions will reduce the fear of becoming a victim of crime, as the perception really is much different to the actual reported levels of crime." What our American friend added, "Since when did that bit of blarney become criminology theory?" What we really all know via empirical testing in places like New York City is that the presence of more police officers on the streets on foot sent personal crime levels plummeting. Mayor Giuliani became a national hero implementing those practical common sense ideas about criminology, and New York City became livable again. World at 8 says, "Pathetic, stupid, ignorant people hanging balls of wool from trees. They probably think it deters global warming as well." More than 20% of everyone's income tax bill goes straight to benefits. From the Daily Mail. The Prime Minister defended cutting welfare spending as Mail Online revealed a fifth of income tax goes straight to fund Britain's vast benefits bill. New Treasury figures reveal the average taxpayer now spends more than £1,100 each on benefits, excluding pensions, while a further £370 goes on paying interest on the nation's debts. Chancellor George Osborne is coming under cabinet pressure ahead of this month's budget to find more savings from welfare as ministers resist deeper cuts to defence, police and business. Today the Prime Minister said the country would not be able to afford to fund care for the elderly if the nation is squandering billions on welfare for people who could work. Speaking in West Yorkshire, Mr Cameron said there was no magic money tree that allowed the government to spend and borrow more. World at 8 says the magic money tree has been given to various nations in the form of £12 billion per year in foreign aid, whilst our people go hungry. The Guardian reveals the contempt for democracy at the heart of human rights. Sheridaneen Zakawi, writing for Islam versus Europe, says, After the Conservatives promised to repeal the Human Rights Act, the human rights agitators quickly showed their sheer contempt for democracy. Here the Guardian tells us that it doesn't matter what laws elected representatives pass in Parliament, even if their specific agenda was endorsed by the electorate. The judicial apparatus can do what it wants anyway, even ignore Parliament or strike down laws. From the Guardian, at any rate, if the Human Rights Act were repealed, it's not obvious that it would make much difference to how the British courts act now. The judges here have developed a set of human rights principles which are indigenous to the common law and which would almost certainly grow to fill the gap left by the Act's removal. Judges deal in facts and real human stories, not rhetoric, and so might be squeamish about sending people to places to be killed or tortured, or allowing the same here on the say-so of someone like Theresa May or, by then, Nigel Farage. In fact, some judges might even be emboldened to strike down Acts of Parliament for breach of human rights, something that the current legislation specifically prohibits, and so would be easy with the Human Rights Act off the scene. What would the Tories do then? Withdraw from the legal system? She concludes by saying, human rights and democracy are often mentioned in the same breath, as if they were corollaries of one another. The truth is, they are polar opposites. Hear, hear, the world today totally agrees. European news. Danish headmaster in court for sex offences. The 36-year-old headmaster of a private school in Norrbo, Denmark, has been arrested and charged in Malmö, Sweden, for allegedly exposing his penis and chasing a 23-year-old woman around a Malmö park in August 2012. According to some websites, the man is Shahid Mehdi, leader of the Islamic Urqa school in Norrbo and former leader of an Islamic cultural society. News agencies in Denmark have condemned the naming of Mehdi before he stands trial. He is well known to the Danish public for his distinctive Muslim attitudes. In 2007, he said on a DR2 programme, Talk to God, that women not wearing headscarves were asking to be raped. Copenhagen. Palestinian girl beaten for having Danish boyfriend. From Denmark, a Palestinian family's honour was offended when their 17-year-old daughter chose to have a Danish boyfriend. According to the police, the girl's parents picked her up and took her to her uncle's home, where the girl's aunt and uncle were told it was okay to kill her as the father didn't want to see her again. The girl was then stripped, beaten with a leather belt, had her hair cut off and was strangled with the belt. After 2 hours of violence, the young girl eventually escaped and reported her ordeal to the police. Her parents and aunt and uncle are in police custody. Belgium. Man sentenced for tearing Koran in front of Muslims. RTL Belgium reported that a man named only as Arnie S., originally from Blankenberg, was sentenced on Wednesday by the Criminal Court of Bruges to 4 months in prison for having torn a copy of the Koran in front of a group of Muslims in June 2012 in Ostend. On the 8th of June last year, in the early evening, the accused participated in a demonstration in Ostend. After the demonstration, he went into a cafe where he exchanged words with around a dozen Muslims. In front of their eyes, Arnie tore a copy of the Koran. According to FDE Zush, Arnie claimed the Muslims threw the Koran at his head, which provoked his action. Olivier Wright, the accused lawyer, requested that his client be acquitted. According to him, there was no question of any infringement on the law on racism. Drew's Info reports the judge deemed the act racist and sentenced Arnie to 4 months and a €600 fine. I'm very sorry there will be no From the Belly of the Beast today, as Nick Griffin is actually travelling in Europe. He gives his apologies and he'll be back next Friday. Thank you. World News. It's not a good time to be a Hindu in Bangladesh. Witness the headlines from Asia News, Italy. Bangladesh. Dozens killed in clashes between Islamists and police. Muslim anger explodes against Bangladesh Hindu community. Islamic Party wants to expel minorities and reunify with Pakistan. In January this year, the Islamic Religious Authority called for calm as violence erupted after the sentencing to death of a leader of the Jamaat al-Islami Islamic Party, accused of war crimes in 1971. More than 800 people were injured as explosions rocked several neighbourhoods of the capital. Temples and houses were burned in the Hindu community in the southeast of the capital. In early March, the violence continued as scores of homes have been set on fire, women and girls have been assaulted, temples have been desecrated, and statues of the goddess Kali have been destroyed. In Kulma, a town in the country's southwest, various activists from the Jamaat Shibir, Jamaat al-Islami's youth wing, and the BNP, that is the Bangladesh National Party, led protesters towards Dopapara, a poor area largely inhabited by Hindus. Rapidly, the Muslim extremists set fire to 8 homes and looted 10 stores before they were dispersed by police. Since unrest began more than a week ago, 87 people have died, mostly police and peaceful protesters. The atmosphere is increasingly tense after the Bangladesh National Party, the country's main opposition party, decided to throw its support behind Jamaat and called for an end of war tribunals set up by the ruling Awami League. In addition, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party has called for the death penalty imposed on Jamaat's deputy chief, Delwar Hussain Saidi, to be dropped and for the government to resign. Well organised, Jamaat has a large pool of supporters. On a number of blogs, many of them are openly calling for reunification with Pakistan and the expulsion of Hindus, atheists and Christians. Instructions are also provided on how to sabotage railway lines, attack security forces and cause unrest during strikes. World at 8 comments, oh dear, partition all over again with the same lousy players. Osama's son-in-law, New York court. Suleiman Abu Ghaith, Osama bin Laden's son-in-law and al-Qaeda spokesman, following the September 11 attacks, was captured in Jordan and flown to the USA by the CIA. He will appear in US federal court in New York, charged in a conspiracy to kill Americans. USA Today reports federal law enforcement officials did not elaborate on the details of Ghaith's arrest, but Pete King, who first confirmed the operative's capture, said he was taken into custody a week ago in Jordan. I commend our CIA and FBI, our allies in Jordan and President Obama for their capture, King said in a written statement. I trust he received a vigorous interrogation and will face swift and certain justice. King, who is on the House Intelligence Committee, said the propaganda statements issued by Ghaith and bin Laden that lauded the attacks in 2001 are alone enough to merit the most serious punishment. If convicted, Ghaith faces a maximum punishment of life in prison. Ghaith was not a field marshal, but he could certainly shed light on that part of the operation, Hoffman said. Assistant FBI Director George Venizelos, the Bureau's top agent in New York, said Ghaith held a key position in al-Qaeda comparable to the consigliere in the mob family or propaganda minister in a totalitarian regime. He used his position to persuade others to swear loyalty to al-Qaeda's murderous cause, Venizelos said. Armenian genocide to be included in Australian school curriculum. Armen Press, the Armenian news agency, are reporting Australia has launched a campaign in order to include the topic of genocide committed against Armenians, Greeks and Assyrians in times of the Ottoman Empire in the Australian school curriculum. The campaign follows the decision of the country's Education Council, according to which from 2014 the Holocaust will be included in the 10th grade's educational programmes. Armen Press reports referring to danyabultani.net, the Turkish World Bulletin. Turkish organisations which are against the campaign have published a statement in the internet, noting that some circles want to present controversial historical events as genocide. It's also been noted that calls of Armenian, Greek and Assyrian organisations in Austria have caused the Turkish reaction. In response to the announcement on online petition, NSW Border Studies don't include the alleged Armenian, Greek and Assyrian genocide as part of the school curriculum has been set up. World Date notes that most of the signatories appear to be Turkish. The World Date agrees with the New South Wales Border Studies that this should be taught. It would appear that even 100 years later the Aussies have not forgotten the Turks at Gallipoli, and our European government are about to let the buggers into the EU. This presenter notes that the Turk shot her half-brother at Gallipoli in the throat and he took 2 days to die on the wire. So what's that about the Turks? Thought for the day: racism, sexism and ageism in the workplace. A short thought today on truisms and facts of racism, ageism, sexism and other isms in the workplace. We all know the new religious rule or anti-Christian rule for our workplaces, that of not wearing a crucifix if you're a Christian. Of course, in today's PC society, the peoples of all other new religions to this country are allowed to wear whatever in the name of their religions. habibs, bracelets, knives, nakibs, burqas, full-face coverings, bits of string and more, all of which are apparently more socially acceptable than a simple cross around one's neck. Because, as we also know, to let others know you are a working Christian is simply not on. Sexism in the UK workplace is rife, and I don't mean the happy slappy on the backside interchanges of yesteryear. I mean a climate of fear in most workplaces in case one oversteps the mark and the company is sued. These suings can be about anything, even slightly offside, and often are storms in teacups, but very expensive ones, both in legal fees and court appearances, which is why most of these even spurious claims are settled out of court to avoid publicity from the media, which would inevitably be adverse towards the employer. There have been several prosecutions of late from those of ethnic origins against fellow workers or employers who have not apparently come up to scratch over promotions or have dropped an offside remark. So you also have the racist side of things rearing its unnecessary head, although of course it should be classed as religious hate crime. Oh dear, already my poor head is spinning. I took a very quick look on the web at the structure of the racial, sexual and religious harassment and decided against looking again. I did see, however, a small paragraph at the end which reads, "This definition was accepted by the government and was added to all forms of discrimination legislation. The various separate anti-discrimination laws have now all been unified into the Equality Act 2010, and claims of harassment in discrimination law cases will in future be decided by tribunals applying a standard definition of harassment set out in section 26 of this Act." Oh dear. I look back with fondness at the old days, when if you took a job in, say, an engineering firm, which I did, and was in fact the youngest girl out of the 7 women in a firm of hundreds of men, I can remember my days there with affection. Those, of course, were the days when women or girls had doors open for them, and for the most part if a guy told a sexist joke it wasn't the end of our world, as indeed the odd slap on the bum wasn't either. There was an air of tolerance around them which is missing now. There was also humour which has fallen by the wayside. Men were men with all their failings, and we were the weaker sex with all ours, but both appreciated that we were working alongside each other, and you either got on or you got out, quietly and quickly, without all the fuss and bother it entails now. Now the climate of fear in most workplaces is palpable, with concerns over lack of jobs and the new office racism problems do not make any easier. You would have thought in the care industry, that much maligned and much needed sector of the workplace, workers would have things easier, especially considering the failure of care in the community and the shutting down and taking over of hundreds of care homes, mental homes and homes for special needs people. You would think it would band people together, like hell. The son of a friend of mine works locally in an area enhanced, which only boasts one small old people's home, which turned itself into a dementia care home last year. Bearing in mind it has no full-time nurse on duty, it really shouldn't be calling itself a nursing and dementia care centre. He's worked there 1 year. He has a lot of experience in mentally challenged young people and elderly care and has done a dementia training course. He also has an MVQ, but he also is the only guy in the place. Bad. Very bad. His fellow female workers don't like men around if they're married or simply not interested in their fellow slappers. And this guy's mother, my friend, has gathered information from previous male workers there, one of which lasted a whole month before being driven out back to his old job, and their experiences run along the same lines. This band of harpies alter shifts so that James, as I shall call him, has to work late one day and early the next. That is, stop at 10 p.m. on Monday and go in at 6:30 a.m. Tuesday for 8-hour shifts. Try this in quick succession over the course of a few months with only a day off in between, and anyone would find it exhausting. Put that with continued harassment and bullying, finally reducing hours down to part-time, extending a probationary period from 3 months to 1 year, continually holding meetings for discipline, and best of all, arranging a disciplinary hearing for, amongst other things, racist comments and inappropriate handling of an elderly woman. And that says it all. Suffice to say, the customers adore James, as do their relations, and at no time has any handling occurred, certainly not of the inappropriate kind. As to the racist comment, This comprised of James reading aloud a Daily Mail headline to some other workers when there was a Nepalese worker present and a Romanian one of which, or both, obviously took exception to what was printed. How can these women get away with it? Well, there are two ways to skin a cat, and of course James is well underway with arrangements to leave the area, but his mother, my pal, is understandably very upset that he's being forced out by lies, and nasty ones at that. There is no recourse but to go, not for James the luxury of appointing a solicitor and taking him to court for defamation of character. There is apparently no union, he was told, but it later transpired there is one, but no representative for him to consult. Luckily or unluckily for the other inmates, this home is being investigated at present, but that's too late for James and the other guys who have been forced out. The only surviving man in there now is a new Polish guy who speaks no English and just smiles and waves, so therefore is not worth going after by these females. James is not alone, especially in that industry which is run by women for women in mind. Many care homes and similar need men to do the heavy lifting and attend to the elderly males, so why don't they treat them better? They do, however, in the true spirit of multiculturalism, employ people straight off the banana boat who have no qualifications at all, and certainly have no investigations into possible criminal records carried out before they join. James had to wait 2 months before his CRB was passed, and yet laughing Polish persona walked straight in unchecked 2 weeks ago. That was why I joined the British National Party. Not because I hate Muslims, because I don't, but because my own mother suffered terribly when this multicultural mess came into our hospitals, nursing and care homes, because the owners deemed it preferable to import their uncarers cheaply rather than pay local agency rates. Well, this way of employing practically anybody, if they are female and foreign, has not gone away, and it is getting worse. We've reached the stage in this country now of putting our own out of work in favour of foreigners, and in most cases these foreign workers are no better than our own people, and in some cases don't work as hard. So racism and sexism have hit the care of the elderly, mentally challenged and physically challenged in this country. So-called PC office politics have spread and ruined what was once a very good thing in Britain. It was getting bad in the blue chip company I worked for some years ago, but the funniest thing I heard was when I left, this firm paid thousands of pounds for standing boards to be imported from the States. Now these are an idiot's dream. Instead of having chairs at coffee sites, they brought in upright boards which leaned backwards, and instead of sitting and having your coffee in solitude, you leaned against these boards, and as they were placed opposite one another, you had to talk to someone else in that office about preferably business. So you even lost your coffee break time. How stupid is that? Of course, ageism in offices has always been there, but now it's peculiar in its polarity. You have people who will not employ anyone over 25 if they're female, or 35 if male. Both financial and high-tech companies excel at this. Get them young, drain them and throw them away. On the one hand, we have the government extolling us to work until we're really old, around 70 odd, and yet can you get a job over 50? No, so the whole point of that is useless and just a balm to put on workers who will get lousy pensions. Very few people will have a job when they are 60 to carry on working with until 70. In fact, if you're over 50 and female, you can look forward to working in a doctor's reception if literate. Oh joy, all those bloody ill people, no thanks. Working in a supermarket at the till, or a charity shop which is virtually no money at all. If male, what is there? If you have an HGV licence you can drive a lorry. You can even do what a friend of mine does and compete with the followers of Islam in the chauffeur game. Well, there's always voluntary work. I'm not talking about the professionals. You can be a doctor until you're virtually too bloody old to write a prescription or even see the patient properly. And if a lawyer or barrister, the field is open until you can barely crawl to the courts. And you'll find that all the professor bods employed in experimenting in various fields can also be ancient. Teachers don't last the course with all those awful schools and even worse pupils, and retire or go balmy relatively early. And of course in the brave new multicultural world, all us oldies will soon be encouraged to go out into a hillside and freeze to death, so leave our homes for immigrants who need them for breeding. There, problem solved. I'm already practically Soylent Green. So there we have it, a short précis on the unfairness of the workplace today. It's a fatal combination of politically correct politics and multi-ethnic and multi-religious conflicts, which in a perfect world we would not have in this country unless we had imported the people and religions to do it. Differing cultures do not mix well in everyday life, let alone in a cramped surrounding or an office or workplace. Some do, many do not. Combine that with a new Marxist social order and the movement of actual work and manufacturing to the east, the complete hijacking of our high streets, and you have the largest case of socio-economic engineering imposed on a country, apparently by other countries, both in and out of the European Union. As an update, a friend of mine's daughter of 17 has just managed to get a job to help her mum out, and she gets £4 an hour. The minimum wage for 16 is £3.68. You don't get £6 an hour until you're over 21. Now this could explain why most of our young immigrants are over 21. We British were known for our sense of humour, our manufacturing and our shops. What have these been replaced by? Humour, nil. Manufacturing, nil. And shops, nil. I can be heard muttering into my hot chocolate. It's all in the plan, my friends. It's all in the plan. And finally, the world's strangest towns. Longyearbyen. Yeah, believe it or not. From Travel and Leisure, our World at 8 team found this interesting tidbit about Longyearbyen in Norway, otherwise known as Longyear City, at least until 1926. Not because their year is any longer than anyone else, but because of John Munro Longyear from Lansing, Michigan in the USA. He was a noted developer of timber and mineral lands in America and the central figure behind the Arctic Coal Company in northern Norway. Anyway, on to Longyearbyen. There is no dying allowed in this remote Arctic town. Well, you can die, but you can't be buried here. You heard that right. No body has been buried in the local cemetery in almost 100 years. Why? The perpetually frigid temperatures prohibit corpses from properly decomposing. Following the influenza epidemic of 1917, Longyearbyen banned burials in the town's graveyard. The local polar bear population rivals the human one, and it's not abnormal for the townspeople to shoot a bear in self-defence. Hunting is illegal. So even after a polar bear takes its last breath in this mining town, it must also be sent away for its final resting spot. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend. UK News. Falkland Islanders defy Argentina with Sunday referendum. The Falkland Islanders, well, 1,649 registered voters, go to the poll on Sunday in the first of 2 days of voting to express their wish to retain British rule. The vote is expected to send a near-unanimous rebuke to Argentina. Reuters have reported Ladbrokes described the result as the biggest certainty in political betting history and said no one had placed a bet on a no vote. The confidence of the bookmakers on a yes result give our police and media. Danish headmaster in court for sex offences. Belgium, man sentenced for tearing Koran in front of Muslims. It's not a good time to be a Hindu in Bangladesh. Armenian genocide to be included in Australian school curriculum. Thought for the day. Sexism, racism and ageism in the workplace. And finally, the world's strangest towns. Longyearbyen.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday, March the 8th. Falkland Islanders defy Argentina with Sunday referendum. The absurdity by our liberal Marxist friends at the BBC. The BBC, alongside Charlotte Bilby, a senior lecturer in criminology at Northumbria University, and Sergeant Simon Barnes, actually believe hundreds of pom-poms and knitted items have been strung from trees and lampposts to help reduce the fear of crime in an area of Leicester. Miss Bilby said, "I think that making an area look cosier certainly makes an area feel safer." And, as we all know, more officers on the beat doesn't is such that £1,000 bet with most online bookies on a yes vote will earn you just £1, whilst if you are foolish enough to place the same 1,000 on a no vote, you could, in theory, win £50,000. The absurdity of our police and media. If you want to weep for your children, start here, refers to a BBC News Leicester article, Guerrilla Knitting in Leicester to Reduce Crime Fear. The first article is obviously written by an American and the second